Imagine the darkest hour before dawn on a Saturday morning. 11 relentless days had slipped by since the Allied armies surged onto the beaches of Normandy, and with every passing hour, the situation for Germany was unraveling further. When Rommel finally reached his headquarters in La Roche-Guyon, he was a man drained to the core. Haunted by sleepless nights, battered by ceaseless bombing raids, and tormented by casualty lists that grew like a tide, he could no longer resist. Deep down, he already knew the truth. The war in the West was slipping beyond saving. And then came the news that stopped him cold. Dear friends, if this video has reached you, it's not by chance. Right now, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Write a number from 1 to 5 in the comments. I will personally respond to the first 50 comments, and make sure to watch the video until the end. Hitler was on his way to the front. In just 6 hours, Rommel would have to stand before him. Picture that moment. What would you say if you were the one expected to tell the Führer what no one else dared even whisper? For Rommel, the burden was clear. Germany could not win the Battle of Normandy. The Desert Fox would have to confront his leader with a reality Hitler refused to see. So what truly unfolded behind the sealed doors of that meeting? Why did Hitler erupt in fury and leave France forever, never to return? That is the very mystery we are about to peel open. At precisely 3 a.m. on June 17, 1944, Rommel stumbled into his headquarters. All he wanted was sleep, just a few hours of oblivion. But his chief of staff, Hans Speidel, delivered a shock instead. An urgent summons from Hitler himself awaited them, demanding their presence 240 kilometers away. In only 6 hours, the Führer, who almost never ventured near the front, would personally meet with him and von Rundstedt. Rommel scarcely had a moment's rest. By 3:30 a.m., he was already back on the road, racing through the moonlit French countryside, grateful at least that Allied fighter bombers rarely prowled the skies at night. Hitler's decision to fly west had come on a sudden impulse. Days before, Rommel had challenged him, urging him to come to France and witness the worsening disaster firsthand. Perhaps Rommel imagined that one of Hitler's advisors would appear instead, but the idea that the Führer himself would come. No one had expected that. Just after midnight, Hitler's airborne convoy touched down in Metz. It consisted of a specially equipped Focke-Wulf 200 Condor carrying Hitler himself, accompanied by 3 more FW-200s filled with his entourage. By 8 a.m., he arrived at the Maréville complex near Soissons-au-Port, fortified underground installation Hitler had never used before. It lay only 90 kilometers from Paris and roughly 250 from the embattled Normandy front. Rommel and von Rundstedt reached the complex just in time. SS guards searched them thoroughly before ushering them inside. There, in a stark chamber adorned solely with a fireplace and a bas-relief of Napoleon, Hitler sat waiting. He perched on a simple stool, pale as chalk, silent, and seething with rage. From the first moment, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Hitler berated them for failing to halt the Allied invasion. 11 days since D-Day, he barked, and everything was collapsing. Cherbourg, he insisted, must be held at any cost. But von Rundstedt answered with blunt honesty. It was impossible. The Allies dominated the skies and the sea. Even as they spoke, American units were poised to slice off the Cotentin Peninsula, trapping 4 German divisions around Cherbourg. The city's fate mattered desperately. If the Allies seized it, they could unload supplies into Normandy at a far greater pace. Rommel, exhausted and increasingly irritated, was harsher still. He spoke of the grinding war of attrition he had predicted months before, of shattered morale, relentless Allied bombardment, and the utter futility of fixed defenses against the thunder of Allied naval guns. Facing such a foe, Rommel declared, Fighting was practically impossible. He insisted the German troops had not been caught unaware. Their resistance in the first hours of the invasion had been almost superhuman. But supply lines were torn apart daily. Allied aircraft ruled the daylight skies, and naval artillery alone could smash any attempted counterattack. Montgomery, Rommel noted, was repeating the same deliberate tactics he had used in North Africa slow, crushing offensives backed by overwhelming air and naval support, followed by coordinated infantry assaults. Then Rommel delivered his chilling prediction. Cherbourg would fall within a week. Hitler said nothing. So Rommel continued, explaining that frontline soldiers were numb from constant shelling, demoralized by Allied firepower, and suffocated by the enemy's vast logistical superiority. With the Allies landing 2 to 3 divisions each week, far more than the scattered reinforcements trickling into Normandy, it was only a matter of time before the entire front collapsed. But Hitler refused to accept this. Cherbourg, he repeated, had to hold. Shifting to strategy, Rommel argued that the only viable move was a withdrawal inland, followed by a counterattack beyond the reach of naval guns. But such a plan required freedom of action, more tanks, air support, and the authority to operate without constant approval from the OKW. As the morning wore on, Hitler softened slightly, but still rejected Rommel's key demands. He refused to deploy the V-1 rockets against the invasion beaches. He also rejected transferring General von Salmuth's 15th Army to Normandy, still fearing a second landing at the Pas de Calais. Rommel, visibly frustrated, pointed out that Hitler's information came from officers studying maps, far from danger. They do not know the front, he emphasized. They ask us for trust, yet they give us none. He reminded Hitler that Churchill had already visited his troops, lifting their spirits immensely. Rommel even hinted that Hitler might do the same. To everyone's astonishment, Hitler agreed and declared that he would visit Normandy. But at that moment, the meeting was abruptly cut short. An Allied bomber formation was approaching the area. Instantly, they rushed into the Maréville complex's air raid shelter. Inside the dim refuge, waiting for the danger to pass, the conversation shifted into a more informal, almost surreal calm. Imagine stepping into that tense room, where every word hung in the air like a warning bell. Rommel, breaking the unspoken rules of courtly caution, spoke with a rare frankness. He laid bare Germany's desperate plight on every front, and the sheer impossibility of holding out indefinitely. His voice carried an unmistakable implication. The war was already lost, and perhaps, just perhaps, it was wiser to seek peace. But tell me, what reaction could such honesty provoke in Hitler, a man who could not bear the slightest whisper of defeat? Naturally, he loathed hearing anything of the sort. This was the last truth he wanted forced into his ears. And yet, even he conceded that negotiations were out of the question. Why? First, because he personally had no desire for them. And second, because, in his mind, the Allies had long since chosen Germany's destruction and subjugation as their endgame. A conditional surrender, he insisted, would never be accepted. Thus he ended his tirade with a grim decree. Now everything hinged on fanatical resistance, on every front, to the very end. He urged Rommel to set aside any political worries and focus solely on halting the invasion. Those were the final words he ever addressed to Rommel before they parted. And yet, despite the bleakness of the meeting, Rommel walked away that afternoon, carrying a faint spark of optimism. He drew encouragement from Hitler's possible trip to Normandy and from the dictator's fervent excitement about the so-called miracle weapons, the Mi-262 jet fighter, the V-1 rockets, and other technological marvels still in development. During their conversation, Hitler had even shown him the destruction the V-1s were causing in London, convinced that these bombardments might one day shatter British morale. But not everyone shared this delusion. Von Rundstedt regarded the entire conference as a pointless exercise, and he was absolutely right. Rommel would not receive full authority. The Mi-262 would never arrive in Normandy in time. The revolutionary V-2 rockets Hitler had praised would not appear until long after the campaign had ended. Supplies would continue to trickle in too slowly, too sparsely. The troops would remain stretched to the breaking point, inching ever closer to collapse. And Hitler himself would never make that trip to Normandy. That very afternoon, fate intervened. A stray V-1 veered off course and detonated just a few kilometers from his headquarters, where Rommel and Rundstedt had only recently departed. The blast shook more than the surrounding earth. It shook Hitler's nerve. Alarmed by the near miss, General Jodl urged him to return to Bavaria. What if another wayward V-1 were to kill the Führer? Reports of French resistance activity nearby only heightened the sense of danger. Suddenly, the idea of visiting the front no longer seemed heroic. It seemed reckless. Hitler canceled the trip and retreated to the Berghof. He would never again step on French soil. So then, what's your take on this fateful meeting? Below you'll find the documentary we filmed in Normandy with Antonio Munoz, where we uncover all the hidden corners of this battle. And as always, I'll see you next Sunday. Until then, farewell.